Today, a new moon is in the sky. Those words echoed across the United States on an October night in 1957, announcing the Soviet Union's launch of Sputnik 1. It was the first man-made object to ever reach outer space. Hello, my name is Daniel Sheth, and today I will be discussing space exploration. Now, humanity's journey to the cosmos did not begin with a man on the moon or even a massive rocket. Instead, it began with a beep. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1. It was a small metal sphere the size of a beach ball, which you can see up there. It circled the planet at 30,000 kilometers per hour and broadcast a repeating radio signal back down to Earth. That simple beep beep was heard around the world and sent a shockwave throughout all echelons of American society. A rival nation admitted to space first, and pretty much no one had anticipated it. What followed was a frenzy of political pressure and investment that culminated in one of humanity's greatest ever achievements. Now, NASA's funding skyrocketed, and through the Mercury and Gemini programs, they successfully sent 22 astronauts to outer space. However, to gain a definitive edge on the Russians, they looked to the moon, launching the Apollo program. And sure enough, on July 20th, 1969, Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon. As you may have heard, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. And it truly was. But here's what fewer people talk about. That leap ended just 3 years later. See, now that the United States had won the space race, there is simply no political will or public excitement to keep going to the moon. In fact, the final 3 Apollo missions were actually canceled due to a lack of funding. President Richard Nixon placed the final nail in the coffin. Instead of going to Mars, he directed NASA to develop the space shuttle. And while the space shuttle, to its credit, did enable decades of scientific advancement, including the International Space Station, it unfortunately also marked the end of an era. NASA was no longer exploring the deep unknown. Instead, they were operating in orbit, slowly, carefully, and with a much tighter budget. It also begs the question, how much of our motivation to explore space really came from human curiosity, as opposed to a simple desire to best our rivals? That brings us to a turning point. In 2006, a small company by the name of SpaceX, whom you may have heard of, launched their first rocket. Unfortunately, it exploded. But their next 2 launches failed as well. But the 4th attempt worked. It was a moment that changed the game, not just because the rocket flew, but because it showed the world that space was no longer reserved for the government. Space had a new player, private enterprise. This is critical because companies are markedly different from government. They exist to fulfill the human wants and needs of their shareholders, which can include people like you. And while it's true that many of their shareholders simply wanted to turn a profit, there were in fact many at SpaceX who were truly invested in the company's mission of reaching Mars, most notably their founder, Elon Musk. And over the past few years, more space companies like Blue Origin, Rocket Lab, Axiom have turned space flight into an industry. But it's not just about who's going to space, but how they're getting there. Let's talk numbers. In the days of the space shuttle, the cost to send 1 kilogram to orbit was $54,000. Today, private space companies have dramatically reduced that figure. Take a look at Rocket Lab's Electron, a smaller, more agile launcher for lightweight satellites. It comes in at $25,000 per kilogram. That's already a massive step forward compared to legacy systems. But there's also SpaceX's Falcon 9. It didn't just lower the price a little, it shattered it, coming in at $3,000 per kilogram, a near 20-fold cost reduction compared to the space shuttle. What this new generation of rockets does differently is reusability. Because here's the thing. We've always treated rockets the way we would a paper plate. You use it once, then throw it away. Imagine if this were the case for airplanes. You'd fly from Madrid to New York, only to parachute out of the plane as it crash lands into the ocean. It sounds ridiculous, but that's how we've always treated rockets. SpaceX changed that by landing and reusing boosters. Other companies soon followed, which allowed them to dramatically reduce the cost of going to orbit, increase the cadence or frequency of launches, and made the idea of space flight scalable. New rockets like Neutron, New Glenn, and Starship promised to reduce the cost per launch even further. So, what's the secret ingredient that has allowed private enterprise to succeed where government has failed? To that, we can look at the people actually building the rockets. They are operating in a sink or swim environment. Workers must constantly innovate and reduce costs to keep their jobs and to also keep their companies alive. In a way, this intense pressure is similar to that of the Apollo era of spaceflight, where rocket engineers had the pride of the nation resting on their shoulders. But in both eras, something deeper fueled the innovation, something that drives investors to even embark on this journey to space in the first place. And that something is human curiosity. Whether it's racing to beat the Soviets or racing to reach Mars, what drives people isn't just competition or economics. It's the timeless urge to push boundaries, explore the unknown, and ask, what's out there? And oftentimes, people think that what's out there is just Mars or settling another planet. But that's not actually the case. We are increasingly using space to support life on Earth. Satellites can monitor climate change and make weather forecasts in real time. They form global communication networks like Starlink, which has supported Ukraine during its war with Russia. They can even predict earthquakes with cosmic radiation. In other words, space is becoming something tangible, profitable even, and that changes everything. Investors are pouring in and new industries are being born. A great case study is NASA's Artemis program, the successor to the Apollo missions. It aims to build a base on the moon by partnering with private companies, and perhaps someday use it as a logistics hub to reach Mars. Unlike Apollo, Artemis isn't a lone government endeavor, and for that reason, it has the potential to be sustainable. This model, where companies compete to iterate fast and reinvest their revenue, is what makes this moment in space history so different. To quote Eric Berger's book, Re-Entry, private enterprise has adopted a work ethic unlike anything seen before in traditional aerospace. Development timelines that once took years now take place in less than a month. So why do I think this new space age is here to stay? Because for the first time, space exploration is sustainable. Take SpaceX, for example. And I know we've used them a lot, but they are the first space company. They used their profits from Falcon 9 launches to fund the development of Starship, a rocket not just meant to take humans around the Earth, but to take us to Mars. This positive feedback loop, where exploration funds more exploration, is why has never existed before in the space industry. And perhaps most importantly, our underlying motivation has changed. During the Apollo era, we sought to go to space to prove something to the world and to our rivals. That type of motivation could only ever be temporary. Once the flag was planted on the moon and the race was won, our purpose slowly but surely faded away. But today, we go to space to improve life on Earth and solve critical problems, goals that are in of themselves timeless. The dream of space is no longer a distant government ideal. Instead, it is a shared pursuit that everyone can participate in, whether it be engineers, artists, entrepreneurs, or even someone sitting in this room. Thank you.